When we think of the Iliad or the Odyssey, we tend to think of a book. That is, a literary item, one that is canonized in Western literature, printed as text, read in school, or even purchased on Amazon. While the stories themselves are timeless, the text remains a monument to an older, more epic and long-gone era. Our printed editions of Homer, however, emerge from scattered manuscripts, and within them, as with this oldest full manuscript of our Iliad, squiggled, interlinear, and marginal remarks witness an even older time in the life of the epics and indicate a multiformity of varied sources, interpretations, and even alternate myths beneath our static text. These manuscripts are old, but still far removed from a person we might call Homer, or the legendary blind bard who composed the epics. Just as a single text betrays the traditional complexity of the epics, so does the notion of a single author or unique genius as the sole producer of the Iliad and the Odyssey. When classicist and linguist Milman Parry began his work on Homer, he sought comparanda in the South Slavic epic tradition and confirmed from singers like Avdo pictured here, that Homer bore linguistic and structural footprints of both oral and traditional composition, changing our literary assumptions of a single text or a single author. Continued comparative work reinforces a portrait of traditional song communities and their singers' astonishing abilities to perform long, traditional poems without the aid of writing, as does this Tibetan paper singer who sees a long epic unfold before him on this sheet of paper, which consequently is blank. In short, comparanda allows us to reimagine how real people and real performance environments produced the oral-derived epics we now possess. Beowulf, pictured here, is one such oral-derived epic from which oral performance elements have been excavated, allowing new insights into its production and its meaning. Oral poetry and verbal arts extend far from just dead epics as well. The Basquebertsolaritza tradition packs arenas today, and beyond its formal intricacies and conventional rules, it becomes an expression of cultural solidarity where special meaning is encoded within the poetry for the traditional audience. And the art form of hip-hop not only encodes meaning for its audiences to be understood in performance rather than on paper, but like other verbal arts, it thrives on sparring and oral gymnastics that are formally complex and, despite each artist's innovative persona, still are bound by verbal and musical conventions as well. From Homer to hip-hop, the verbal arts are varied and ubiquitous. And this is because humans are quite adept at oral-aural encoding and have been doing it for much of our species' history. On this calendar year of our existence, stylus was not really put to clay, if I may say, until late December, and making us functionally illiterate for most of our experience. And that's okay, because we have these amazing processors that are extremely efficient with not just memory, but aural processing, allowing us to hear and then store networks, structures, and prompts that allow for the composition in performance of long epics or fast-on-your-feet rap battles. As for these mental feats, South Slavic singers will boast they can hear a long performance and later sing it word for word. This is mostly true because the language of oral epic is encoded somewhat differently than everyday speech, especially in the conception of what a single word actually constitutes. Even if you don't read Greek, you can see a symmetry within these lines, taken somewhat randomly from the Odyssey. And while we see several individual words in each structure, the poet thinks of single words as larger units that express an essential idea. Sometimes these combinations are just two words, or in the last lines you see, the whole line essentially means Odysseus or Achilles said. This economy of expression extends beyond small words and groups to whole scenes and even whole story patterns in the epic, allowing the poet not only to compose long stretches of narrative, but to arrange them across an epic in sophisticated patterns, manageable across hundreds or even thousands of lines. In my own work, I look for oral poetic patterns and posit how they create meaning in Homer. This terracotta of Odysseus beseeching his wife, his father, his son, and his loyal swineherd expresses a central pattern in the Odyssey of interrogation and recognition, with recognition being the driving force of the hero's success. Because of this, I think that Queen Arete of the Phaeacians, an undervalued character, plays a pivotal role in the Odyssey, an observation fueled by her resonance with other linguistic signs and patterns in the epic, just the type of encoding we expect in an oral-derived epic. Put simply, oral poetics helps us make sense of what might not immediately be sensible from a literary point of view. Homeric speech is encoded with layers of meaning and associations always lurking behind the words. This is the traditional part of oral traditional poetry, where singers and audiences always know the longer backstory imminent to shorter references. The Trojan horse is merely referenced in the Odyssey, but we all know that story, right? In this way, the Iliad and the Odyssey are not only small slices of Trojan War tradition, but the weight of their meaning comes from their relationship to tradition, only partially recoverable to us. In some cases, we only have short prose summaries of what we know were entire epics about Oedipus or even the death of Achilles. That said, we do know just enough, and knowledge of living epic traditions gives us important insights into how singers organize, reference, and perform their songs in the face of a much larger set of options. Singers now often refer to their traditions as constellations or networks that they, the singer, navigate as they create their art. And although we don't sing our tales so much these days, we too have our cyclic and mythological traditions where storylines remain essentially traditional, but different artists over time choose which moments in the life of a hero to construct, with each performance being a reflection of the artist and the audience. So the Iliad and the Odyssey are just words on a page. But more, they represent a tremendous human cognitive capacity and a relationship between communities of artists and audiences through time. It is this living human aspect of the poetry that, to me, is even more impressive than the literary artifacts and monuments themselves. Thank you.